Puck Junk Podcast. I don't know what number podcast it is. I don't care. The important thing is we're doing a podcast. It is the middle of July whatever. It's been a little while since our last podcast, but that's okay because even though hockey season is over, a lot has gone down in the NHL since the Penguins won the Cup. There's been a couple of crazy.
Who won the Cup?
I believe it was the Pittsburgh Penguins.
Oh yeah, they did.
Yeah, you're familiar with them, I think.
I am. I've heard of them a couple times.
Yeah. They're pretty good from what I understand.
A little bit.
But anyway, I know some of this is old news, but we just haven't had a chance to talk about it. So, and I like the way everybody talks about how the NHL went insane for like a day, and you had this PK Subban for Shea Weber trade. What's your take on that?
All right, I understand it. Just knowing the background, the storyline coming out of this about how, apparently PK is some kind of cancer in the locker room, and that may be true. It may not be true, but whatever. I get it. They wanted to move him. They wanted to get him out of there. But trading PK for Shea Weber, straight up, come on. You got arguably one of the best offensive type defensemen going up against a guy that, he hits the puck hard, but I don't like the trade. I mean, at all. I think Nashville made out better from a player standpoint. I don't necessarily think the fan base is going to ever get over for either team, because they were both beloved players by their fan base. So it's kind of a puzzling thing to me. It really is puzzling.
So let me say this, and I think everybody this is the general consensus. The Montreal coach, Therian, did not like Subban, and the GM, Mark Bergevin, did not like Subban. And so I think that's
because he's not Canadian. He's not a typical Canadian player that's, soft-spoken and, towing the company line. No, he's an individual. Personally, I'm not a fan of the guy. I respect what he does, but he's one of those guys that injects a lot of enthusiasm and chutzpah, if you will, to the game. He's a personality, and there's not many of those in this game.
And that's
because
a problem.
You have all these guys. Well, and it is.
That's a problem.
You want to grow up against other sports where you got guys that are flashy and all this kind of stuff, and yet hockey, albeit I don't mind it, but hockey, breeds these hockey players from young age, and they're taught to say the right things and to do the right things and to act the right way and everything else. A player like PK doesn't come around very often. So, the flash and the flair that he has, look, they focused how many minutes on the clothes that he wears when he goes like the NHL awards and shows up to different events and things like that. He wears these outlandish suits that make Don Cherry jealous. So,
right, I think we agreed last year when we talked about the award show that PK was a highlight of that.
Sure, and he's that kind of player. He's a personality player, but he also can back it up on the ice. I don't discount Shea Weber at all. I don't discount his game. He's a fantastic player. Potential Hall of Famer right there. But just to be able to say to your fans, you know what, we don't care what you think. We're going to, make this deal. I get it. I get what you're doing, but I don't know. It still baffles my mind.
The thing is I've always liked Subban. I've always liked Weber. They're different types of players. They're both great players, obviously. I feel bad for Montreal fans because they lost this really fun player. And here's the thing. Yes, the NHL does train the players, to say the right thing and be boring and be on point, toe the company line, as you said. But, one, that's boring. We're tired of it. 2, PK didn't do that, but he never hurt anybody by doing it. You know what I mean? Like, you never heard anything bad that happened because PK Subban wore an outlandish suit, or because PK Subban acted a little silly, or because PK Subban does that low 5 celebration with Carey Price, right? It wasn't like he was hurting anybody If anything, he was making hockey more interesting. I mean, I love hockey and I'll find everything about it interesting, but just to an outside person, I could see how they would be like, not too interested in this player who's like, yeah, we just got to go out there and work hard and do our thing, and we just got outworked by the other team, and we just got to come back and try harder. And isn't that like what every single player says in the NHL from
That's the robot.
Sidney
That's the
Crosby on
robot
down,
response.
right? And you
Yeah.
won't get that from Subban. You won't get that from Jeremy Roenick, who, by the way, once again snubbed for the Hockey Hall of Fame, which really pisses me off. Again, another guy who wouldn't, bow his head, fall in line, and do everything that he was told, or not voice his opinion. Not saying that Roenick was always right either, but I mean, I think of these two players, and they were both fun in their respective eras. But now for Nashville, not only do they get PK, but they get out of that 12 or 14 million dollar a year contract that offer sheet that they matched from Philadelphia.
Right. And that's another thing. I mean, you can look at it from that money standpoint, but again, I go back to this. You have a player that's a franchise player and you turn around and he's gone just like that. How do you recover from that, and how do you pick up the pieces? It's going to be interesting to see how Montreal handles going into this season, handles bringing Shea Weber out and putting him in the lineup. I mean, I think people will grow to like him, and I think Subban's going to do great in Nashville. I mean, it's Music City down there, so I mean, he would fit in perfectly. I can just see him now wearing like cowboy hats and everything else, but it's those stuffy old school hockey purist suits up in Montreal that didn't get PK, and that's why he's no longer there. I mean, that's the bottom line.
Yeah, and I wish not that I would have any effect on this, but I would have loved to have seen PK Subban come to Chicago. I mean, I wish the Blackhawks had made a pitch for him. I look at the trades they made recently. They sorry. They traded Andrew Shaw to Montreal, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
another baffler right there.
And then they traded Tivu. Well, they traded Brian Bickle and his contract to the Carolina Hurricanes, and they had to
Yeah,
throw in
right.
Teuvo Teravainen, right?
Yeah, Teravainen was basically free.
Yeah.
Is,
Well, it
is
was just
essentially how that works.
here. Take this monster contract. Well, it's not a monster contract, but take this ugly contract, and we'll give you one
Yeah,
of our.
it's not monster, but it's ugly because it's Brian Bickle. So
Yeah, I mean, and we'll give you one of our best and brightest.
no offense to Brian Bickle if he's listening. So
Right, right. And Bickle's done a lot of good work, charity around Chicago and stuff like that. I mean, he's kind of like because my aunt has three pit bulls, and Bickle does a lot for pit bull rescue and just pit bull acceptance. I guess he's kind of popular among my family members. Like my mom bought me for Christmas, like the Brian and Amanda Bickle Foundation had this like pit bull calendar that had like Blackhawk players with pit bulls. That was the calendar. Hawks and pit bulls, right? And that was cute. I mean, it wasn't what I really wanted for Christmas, but it was all right.
yeah, but you get that kind of stuff with players like that. Role players and players that come into a team that have a specific job. You, I mean, look at them across the league. Every team has them. That they're constantly going out and doing charity work and doing all this kind of stuff.
Right.
They become well known in the community. They become respected in the community, and then with a blink of an eye, they're gone. So
Yep.
I mean, I know it's a business, but for a fan base that's loyal, like a Montreal fan base or a Nashville fan base, as we've seen over the last few years, you know, it's going to be rough. I think the biggest baffler, though, not to cut that short, Taylor Hall for Adam Larson. What is that?
That was like saying yes to the first the first boy that asked you to the dance, right? No, I don't know. Like that was just a bad trade. I mean, I don't know. I don't
The
want to.
Oilers are rebuilding. They're in rebuilding mode. They've been in rebuilding mode since Wayne Gretzky went to the Kings. I mean, that's really what we're dealing with here. So you have this Oilers team that gets the number one draft pick or top five draft pick every year, seemingly forever, and can't do anything with these guys. Yeah, they develop into their own players like a Taylor Hall, like Ryan Nugent Hopkins, like what's that guy's name? Oh yeah, Connor McDavid. How could I forget? You got all these budding stars, right? But you can't do anything with them because you all you have are these guys that you put on the front line. You have nobody on the back end. You have no
Right.
goaltending. You have no
Right.
defensemen. How do you build around a top line? How? You can't unless you have something on the back end or you have guys that play defense as well as they play offense. You can't do that. Adam Larson, does that help on defense? Of course it does. But Adam Larson on most teams, I'm sorry, he's not a top line D man. Maybe second line. Sometimes even third, depending on the team you're talking about. So I'll go out on a limb, arguably one of the top 10 players in the NHL. You trade him for what I would consider a second line D man? No. That to me is like, I don't
Taylor
know
Hall
what you
is
put in your coffee, but that's
he,
crazy.
he's not top 10. I mean, come on. I can name 10 players that I'd rather have before Taylor Hall. Crosby,
Maybe.
Ovechkin, Kane, uh, Panarin. Okay, maybe not Panarin because he's good with Kane. But you get the idea. Like, I could name 10. We'll say top 20. Can we agree top 20?
Sure, top 20, but I still say he'd be in the top 10. I think he'd be higher. I've always liked Taylor Hall. I like his game. I like the way he plays.
Okay.
Uh, the problem is he gets overlooked. He gets overshadowed by the fact that Edmonton is so bad. I mean, so bad. I mean, they don't call that hockey Siberia for nothing.
Yeah. Well, and I just want to bring it back for just a second on PK, because I would have loved to have seen, and I don't know if the no movement clauses would have prohibited this. I would have loved to have seen if Montreal was so eager to get rid of PK Subban. I would have loved to have seen. Hey, we'll send you Shaw. Okay, restricted free agent, can't do much with him anyway. But well, they did sign him though. Shaw, Teravainen, maybe like Seabrook or Keith instead of Seabrook. I don't know about. I don't know. Like I think they would have done it. I think they would have done it. I think Seabrook and Subban are comparable. I mean, they're different types of players, but I think they're both pretty good players. But then if you throw in the other things, like I'm wondering if the Hawks could have done like a package deal. I feel like PK is going to be a little wasted. Like yeah, they'd love him in New York, they'd love him in L.A., they'd love him in
I,
Chicago.
I
But
don't think there's a team in this league that wouldn't like to have him.
no, but I'm just thinking about like I mean. You start thinking of some of those Sunbelt teams, and you just look sometimes and you go, like it's not the same. Crosby would not be the same if he was playing for the Carolina Hurricanes, right? I mean, he'd be the same player, but I
Uh,
don't feel like he'd have the same
I
impact,
don't know.
right?
I don't know. Well, because again, you can be a superstar on your team, but if you don't have a supporting cast, it makes it real difficult. I mean, take Gretzky off the Oilers back in the '80s and put him on a different team. Put him on the Kings in the '80s. Would the Kings been as good as they were, or
The
as good
Kings
as the
got,
Oilers?
I don't know, the Kings got close. They
The
had
Kings got
Marcel
better
Dion,
later.
they had Dave Taylor, they had Charlie Simmer.
All
They had
right,
a
fine.
pretty
Put
good
him
team. They could
put him
probably.
on the put him on the Penguins prior to Lemieux. Would the
Oh,
Penguins been good with Gretzky? No, they wouldn't have.
no.
I mean,
Well,
see, he had
the
he had a
Penguins
supporting
weren't
cast.
the
He had
Penguins weren't
guys.
good with Lemieux for 5 years.
They weren't because
No.
they had to build the team around him, and once they did, you saw what happens. Anytime you take a team and you build around a central player, you're going to eventually become a competitor. Edmonton's not done that, and as we've seen saw this past year with the fire sales going on most of the Canadian teams. I mean, look, how many Canada teams made the playoffs? None, zero. I mean, that should be an eye opener of what's been going on a lot of these franchises. People don't want to play for necessarily that kind of structure and that kind
Hmm.
of environment. So that's why it's nice to see the not with ownership change, but with coaching changes and things like that. So I'm really interested to see what happens with Toronto this year coming in. I think Toronto has as good a chance as any team up there going into the playoffs and doing some damage. But it's one of those things. You know, there's so much parity in the league now. These trades that go back and forth. I've heard people argue that PK Subban for Shea Weber is a complete even deal, 1-for-1, straight up, and it's perfect. Again, I don't agree, but you know what? I could see it on paper. I could see it. The Taylor Hall for Larson thing. Don't get that one. I'll never get that one. You could explain it to me 10 ways from Sunday, and I'll never get that one. But that's just my opinion as a nobody fan. So there you go.
Blackhawks signed Brian Campbell to I think it was a 1 year deal.
Again.
Again, yeah, he's back. He says he loves Chicago. He's coming home. We get it. The, Brian Campbell was great here the first time he played here. The problem was that his contract made no sense. He was making something along the lines of $7 million a season. He was the highest paid player on the team at the time. This was, from what I heard, the Blackhawks wanted to make a big splash at their 2009 convention. So they wanted to have they made two really big free agent signings that year. That summer. They signed Brian Campbell to like a $7 million deal. I think he was the top. That would have been 2000, not 2009. That would have been 2008. My bad, 2008. And then they signed Cristobal Huey.
Oh yeah, I remember that guy.
Yeah, and so they signed these guys because then the next year they signed Hossa in 2009 and they had him for the 9-10 Cup run. But so bringing him back at $2 million a year makes sense because it fits in the scheme. I mean, it didn't make sense to have him making two times as much as Kane or two times as much as Taves. And they need the help on defense. Now they have a really solid top four with Keith, Seabrook, Yalmerson, and Campbell. I mean, that is a solid top four.
Yeah, I I don't know. Campbell's a little past his prime, I think.
Yeah, but I think you know what. But I mean, even you look at look at Kimo Timonen from like 2 years ago, right? I mean, that guy was way past his prime, and I'll tell you, if the Blackhawks lost the Stanley Cup, I don't think any fan would have liked him. But because they won the Stanley Cup with him playing a very limited role, everybody's like, "Oh, cool, he gets to retire a winner," and he came back from these blood clots that sidelined him for almost the entire season, and he became like this storybook ending, and it was even like part of the Blackhawks put out this DVD called the first one was called One Goal, and then they put out another one called One Goal Two or whatever, or three or something like that, or it was some documentary that profiled like three players, and Timonen was one of them. And I tell you, there'd be no love for that guy if the Hawks lost. Everybody would remember all the mistakes he made on the ice where he just looked inept. Campbell is going to do fine. What I can't understand is the Hawks signed Jordan Tutu to a 1 year deal.
All that was a replacement for Shaw. They needed somebody that can drop down low and get in the goalie's face and be a pest.
But
And he was pretty much the only one available.
I wouldn't even say Shaw though. I'd say, see, to me, Tutu is more of a Daniel Carcillo kind of player than a. Okay, well, hear me out on this.
He's not
Limited
he can't.
skills,
Okay.
limited skills, sandpaper, grit, kind of get under your skin kind of player.
Well,
So,
that's his game. He's the pest kind of player. But Carcillo, when push came to shove and it was time to drop the gloves, that was Carcillo. Tutu's been in plenty of fights, and he's I don't know. Most of the ones I've seen him in, he doesn't come out on top. Let's put it that
okay,
way.
that makes
But
sense. That makes sense.
that's not necessarily relevant at this point. I mean, with fighting come taking a back seat to the game and everything, and there's not really that goon type player anymore.
Hmm.
you still need somebody that can crash the net, can get down low and get those rebound shots and get in the goalie's face and just wreak havoc down there. Tutu does that. That's his game. Just like Shaw, that was kind of Shaw's game.
Hmm.
Almost every team has somebody like that. Like Philadelphia has Wayne Simmons. I mean, that guy gets under my skin. The Penguins have Hornquist. He does the same thing. So like every team's got to have somebody that can do that type of work on the ice. And by dishing Shaw away, they had to replace that because I don't really remember anybody else on the team that does that kind of stuff.
No, the Blackhawks are not a very aggressive team,
Yeah, they're not chippy.
and that's worked against them in the past. Every time, and here's the funny thing: like every time they get a guy who's kind of tough, they see limited. I mean, Adam Burrish was a good player, or good, not a good. He was a good guy as far as being a tough player, but he was kind of limited with the Blackhawks, and I mean now he's in the minors, and uh, John Scott. I mean that guy.
Yeah,
It's
that was the other thing. Scott's still available, I think. He
ah,
hasn't been signed yet.
no, hey man, I'd love to see. I'd love to see yeah, I'd love to see like a not like a Craigslist posting, but yeah, like a all-star defenseman slash left wing seeking job in National Hockey League, or it'd be like all-star hockey player, NHL all-star hockey player seeking position with NHL club, willing to play defense or left wing, willing to drop the gloves if needed.
You
Uh,
could even make it a 2-for-1 special. You hire him and you get Paul Bissonnette as a consolation prize.
I don't know, like yeah,
Because he's looking for a team too. If you
yeah.
follow his Twitter account.
Well, he's gonna play with LA's farm team another year. I just heard he signed with them. Was it the Ontario Reign?
Oh, is it?
Yeah, something like that. I don't know. I mean, I like Bissonnette. Hey, who else is seeking a job is Ilya Brzgalov.
Oh boy.
I think the Penguins could use a backup.
Penguins have enough goalies. They don't need any more.
Huh?
So the Penguins have enough goalies. They don't need any more. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Hey, it's funny because I know like a while back we talked about the NHL expanding to Vegas. I don't remember if you said it'll never happen or if you said it'll happen, but nobody will come to the games. But they got a team, and
Well,
you know what makes me the happiest about Vegas getting a team and the NHL saying that they're going to expand is that people will stop talking about the expansion rules, like because from like January to like right before the awards, all they were doing, all the pundits, all the writers, this is what an NHL expansion draft might look like. These might be the rules. Teams would probably be allowed to protect one goalie. Teams will probably be allowed to protect four defensemen. I mean, it's fun to speculate, like if you know what the rules are, but it's stupid to speculate if you don't even know what the rules are. So at least they could stop pretending like, hey, let's make up what the rules might be, and now they can start saying, hey, Marc-Andre Fleury is going to be left unprotected in the expansion draft.
yeah, again, I don't know about all that because number one, you have to protect guys. I mean, if you go to what the actual rules were, you have to protect players that have no trade and no movement.
You do.
Something, yes.
Oh well,
Any,
that's no
anybody
fun.
that has anybody that has a no movement or a no trade clause has to be protected. So you automatically lose them as one of your choices. So whether you're going to do eight skaters and a goalie, or what is it? I think
I think it
you either get
was
9 or you get 11. It's one or the other. It
right,
depends on
right,
the
right.
configuration. So if you have really great defensemen, you want to protect all your defensemen, great. But if there's a no trade clause on somebody's contract, my understanding is they have to be one of the ones that are protected. And the Penguins have quite a few guys with no trade clauses. Granted, they're most of the guys that are locked up in contract for the next, 3, 4, 5 years. But the more those guys like Crosby and Malkin and Kessel and Fleury, those guys all have that. So I mean, obviously they're going to be protected. But with Vegas having the expansion team, the NHL is committed to move full bore on this, and they set these rules up so that this team's going to come right out of the box with probably a few star players, not just one, but maybe multiple.
I like this. I like this a lot, and I'll tell you, there's enough talent to go around. I mean, as far as I mean, some people will argue that there's less talent because what used to be 21 teams, what used to be 6 teams, is now 30 teams and now 31 teams, and it's just become so diluted. But talking about the original 6 is an argument for another time because really that was just a league that didn't want to grow. Like,
Well,
but well, they didn't want to grow because they didn't want to have to pay more players. They wanted to have really tight control. I mean, there were multiple reasons, but I mean, the NHL basically grew because they were afraid of being surpassed by the Western Hockey League. That's why their teams. That's why the Kings and the Seals were granted franchises.
well, and it's a completely different time now. I mean, there's so many players out there. There's so much talent that sits on AHL teams
Yes.
and the junior teams
Yes.
that could easily move up and play in the NHL. They just don't because they're on farm teams of other teams that are deep enough that they haven't got their shot yet.
Yeah. I
Player
mean,
development in the NHL is always way behind what most other sports is. I mean, other than baseball, where a guy could get drafted and not show up into the major leagues for 10 years. Football, guy gets drafted, he makes the team, he's playing that year. Hockey, guy gets drafted, it's a few years. Some of these guys go to college, they play in the minors, they play in Europe, they cut their teeth that way before they get their shot at the NHL. And it's only the elite guys that, come up and are able to make an impact right out of the box. So, going into this draft, not only do they get, the unprotected players from, the 30 NHL teams, but they get a shot at some pretty decent draft picks going into the draft as well.
mhm,
So they get, basically they get the third, whatever the third pick is.
mhm.
That's the number of lottery balls to get for the draft.
Okay.
So if I don't know how many the number is, but if let's say whoever finished in third
Right.
got 10 balls, they get 10 balls also. So they have just as much chance as some of those other teams of hitting the number one draft pick.
Mhm.
If they don't, they're guaranteed no less than sixth in the picks each round.
Okay.
So if they end up with third, they pick third, they'll pick third. If they end up with sixth, they'll pick sixth first round, and then they get the third pick in every round after that.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's kind of how up. So, I mean, third round pick, or not third round, but third pick in the draft, that's not too shabby.
Why not
I
just
mean,
give
you're
them
gonna,
the first?
well, you
I
can't
mean,
give them
why not?
who's pick.
Who's what? I don't know. But the point is that I mean, they couldn't do that when with Eric Lindros. That was when they changed that, where the Sharks got to pick second overall because Quebec balked at not getting their first overall pick, even though they had earned it.
Yeah, how'd that work out for them?
Pretty well, not for Quebec, but for Colorado, pretty good.
That's what I meant for Quebec. How'd
Yeah,
that work out for them?
yeah, but
Did they get that Lindros player?
well, they got him, but then they traded him for something better.
Because he refused to play.
Yeah, well, that's
He wasn't.
fine. They basically built their championship team on that trade.
Yeah,
They
that's true.
they got the parts for
Once
it.
once they escaped Canada.
So, changing gears, I'll be going to the Blackhawk Convention this weekend. It's Friday through Sunday. I haven't gone the past couple of years. It's funny because I went to like the first one in 2008, went to the second one in 2009. The third one in 2010, I was actually really disappointed with. Like, so then I didn't go to the one in 2011. And then I ended up going to 2012 and 2013. And the reason why I'm telling you like all this, like, oh well, I went to this convention, but not that convention. I had a friend. I'm friends with this couple who are dealers. They're really cool. They they specialize in Blackhawk and Penguins memorabilia. So got all the bases covered there. Like my two favorite teams or two teams that I like a lot. But um, they've been able to get me in for free because dealers get a few extra passes to share or whatnot. And I gotta tell you, like I liked the Blackhawk Convention, but then it just kind of grew out of control. They kept adding people, like more and more people are allowed to buy passes to go to it. So then it gets really crowded. I don't know. Have you ever gone to any of these fan conventions?
I have not had the pleasure, no.
Okay, well, I don't know if this is something you would enjoy. Like, obviously, you wouldn't want to go. Like, for the Blackhawks, if you're a Blackhawk fan, it was pretty cool the first year because there were just enough people that if you couldn't, like, if you wanted to go to this panel discussion and it was full, you could find a different panel discussion and that would be empty, or you could wait in line for an autograph, or if this guy, you couldn't get his autograph, you could wait in line for a different autograph, or you'd say, all right, screw it, I'm going to go to this panel discussion. And now it's gotten to the point where it's like, it's so crowded that, like, everything you go to, like, you'll say, oh, okay, I want to get Brent Seabrook's autograph. Well, he's signing at 10 a.m., okay? Well, but they're giving out bracelets at 9 o'clock. And, only the first 315 people who get these, like, red bracelets can get his autograph. Okay, fine. So then you think, well, they're giving out the bracelets at 9 o'clock. I'll get there at 9 o'clock. So, well, what time should I get there?
Mm, I don't know.
You have
Sounds like
people,
probably pretty early.
yeah, you have people lining up at 6 a.m. They'll be outside of the convention and they'll say, "Oh, I'm in line for Brent Seabrook." And then, so like, when I get there at 9 o'clock when it opens, and I'm like, "Hey, maybe I'll, oh nope, this line is full and it's maxed out." Like, I think one time I was like Brandon Bolig, and I really wanted to get him to sign. I had this thing, this Rockford Ice Hogs. It was like an uncut sheet of cards, and it had all the players on it. It was like the whole 22 card set or whatever, and it had every single card was autographed except four players because those four players at the time were called up to the Blackhawks. So I bring this thing with me thinking, okay, I can get these four guys to sign it, right? Nope.
Yeah.
Impossible, right? So then people
Wow.
will say, okay, well then I can't get this guy's autograph. Ooh, but you know what? There's this panel discussion. There's some players from the 1961 season talking about that Stanley Cup victory. Let's go to that. Nope, because only the first 500 people can get in, and not only does that start at 10:30, but people were lining up at 9:30 or whatever for it. So it's gotten out of hand. And then here's the other thing that's funny: the show happens in a week, and I still don't know who's showing up.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
They
so
don't pre-put out a list or tell you ahead of time?
no, because they used to. Like what they would do is they'd always sell the tickets like December or January. Actually, it used to be a little bit later, and then it kept getting earlier and earlier where they'd say, "Hey, Tim, you want to buy these tickets now?" And it's like right before Christmas, and oh, they're $100 a piece, and oh, we'll announce who will be there at a future date.
Yeah, I'm not risking $100 like that. That's gambling.
Right, exactly. I mean, it used to be they'd show like all these players that would be there, and then you know what it was once they started having to move people because of the salary cap. That's when they couldn't say, "Oh yeah, Dustin Bufflin will be there."
Yeah, because the end of the season, guys disappear. So
So it was funny because in 2010, some of the people headlining the convention, are you ready for this? John Scott, who had yet to play a game as a Blackhawk. Dylan Olson, who was their first round pick, maybe a year or two ago. A couple of other guys, like, I don't even remember, but they were like minor leaguers that had never actually played for the Blackhawks.
yeah,
And it was, people were pissed.
so it gets watered down and diluted. So people lose their, you know, they go crazy over getting tickets for this thing, not knowing who's going to be there, and then when they find out, it's like, well, talk about your all-time backfires.
Well, you know what's funny though is that
I can't
some
believe they start lining up at 6 in the morning.
I
It's not
yeah,
like you're waiting for Stone tickets. It's a Blackhawks convention. I mean, come on. I mean, I understand you really really want to get I don't know.
Andrew Shaw
M-
when he was there.
you really want to get Mashinter's autograph, but you know, I mean, really? Is it worth that? Come on.
Well, that was funny because like 3, 4 years ago, I was making fun of like people waiting in line for Bowleg and Shaw and like those guys, and it was funny. What was it? There was a. I'm trying to think. It was the VIP signers or whatever they call them. Like Kane, Taves, Keith, Sharp, who's obviously gone, Seabrook, and then any of the Hall of Famers. The only way to get their autograph, you can't line up and like get a bracelet for them. What they do is they give you a scratch and win ticket, and you scratch it, and then it'll say, "Congratulations, you get an autograph from a VIP signer. Come back Sunday at 9 a.m. at Hall C." And they don't tell you who it is. You don't know
Oh
until
my
like
gosh.
yeah, yeah, like seriously, you don't know who it is until they show up. Although I've figured out a way to figure out who it is, and that's by being very polite and talking to the ushers, which most people are like, "Oh, I want an autograph. Why can't I get one? Give me what you know. What do you mean you don't have any more of those bracelets? You know?" And I'll just always say please and thank you, and I'll just say, "Hey, do you know who's signing here tomorrow at 9 a.m.?" And they'll say, "Well, we know it's not Bobby Hull because he just signed, and we know it's not Jonathan Taves because he signed earlier today, and we know it's not so and so because they had to leave early and they're flying back to wherever tonight." So then I'm always
It's like
able to
process of elimination. You
process
figure
of
out who it is.
elimination. I'm like, all right, it's either Andrew Shaw or Tony Esposito. So I will bring a picture of
Yeah.
each of them or whatever, right? Um, but like one time, like what was it? Like one of the signers was Dennis Savard, and my girlfriend goes in line. She's going to get this autograph for me because the scratch and win ticket was like, congratulations, show up to this stage, whatever, right? And the girl in front of my girlfriend says to her, "This is her story." So she's telling me this story. She said, "Is this for this is for Seabrook, right?" And my girlfriend says, "No, it's for Savard." And she says, "Who?" And she says, "Dennis Savard, Hall of Fame." And she's like, "Ugh, I don't even want this here." And she just hands her the ticket and leaves. Like, and so she ends up getting two things signed by Savard because she had two of those things. But like another time, like literally, like the signer was Pierre Palat, and now I know you and I see Palat all the time at the Rosemont show. The guy
Yep.
signs a lot of autographs. But what was funny was people were like, "Oh," and they would like literally just give their scratch and win ticket to the usher who's at the line. And it was funny because I just
It's
kind of
crazy.
walked up and like the usher was like, "Oh, hey, you're the friendly guy who always says please and thank you. Would you like some more?" And like hands me another one. So it, it's kind of funny. And I don't really go to the panel discussions, and I should, but I'm gonna go this year, and we'll see what it's like.
Yeah. Well, good luck, because it sounds to me like it's a zoo. So
Oh yeah, and you know what? It's in the basement of the Hilton, and there's like no sunlight, and they finally put carpeting down a couple years ago. But you know how those concrete floors really get on you, right?
yep.
Yeah. So anyway, let's see. I think maybe we should change the subject again because we're just kind of all over the place today because it's not like we have any games to talk about unless you want to hear about my men's league hockey team, which I know that's not the same, but we play year round. We're not doing very good this year, but uh, let's. You wanted to talk about case breaks. I've never done a case break. I would like it if you would explain to me what a case break is because I know you throw in your $30 or whatever and you get some cards, but um, and they always have like I know like the National is coming up and this year it's in what Atlantic City, so I won't be going to it. But um, what is a case break and what's the deal with that?
Well, it depends on what side of the table you're talking here. Case break can be a number of things. There's various kinds of case breaks. There's different types of um, or different styles of the way they're run. The most Probably the most common case break is you'll have a breaker that'll buy a case of cards for a certain price. And nowadays, because they're so popular, a lot of the more prominent case breakers are getting deals on cases that the normal Joe Schmo like you and I couldn't get. But they buy these cases up and they raffle off or razz off or whatever you want to call it, but essentially put a price tag on a slot in that case. And so you pay X number of dollars for a spot in that break, and then you end up with whatever slot you've paid for. So sometimes there's a team break, so you would pick a team, or sometimes they're random, where they'll random off a team and say, okay, I have the Detroit Red Wings. So any Detroit Red Wing cards that come out of that case end up being yours for whatever the price you paid for that spot.
So now, would
Now,
everybody pay the same? If it's random, they'll pay the same. But then you also talked about raffling.
well,
Would that be
here's the thing.
would you pay like a different price for a different team, or does everybody get the same?
Here's the thing. What has ended up happening, and back in the days when this first started,
Hmm.
and it started becoming prominent, it was pretty much that. That's how most of these were run, where you'd buy a spot, all the spots were the same price. Pretty much everybody had the same odds as everybody else,
Hmm.
and it went from there. Now that everything's getting super premium and uber expensive, there's hit lists that are put out well ahead of time of when products hit the streets.
Right.
What's actually in there because the sell sheets are already released. So you know which teams have hits, which teams don't, which teams have the better hits, and what's really out there to get. So going into it, breakers now know that, for instance, this year was the big one for hockey. Anybody that's going to get Edmonton is going to pay a heck of a lot more for that spot than anybody that's trying to get a different team. Like, you're not going to pay the same amount for the Florida Panthers as you are for the Edmonton Oilers. Why? Because you have a shot at Connor McDavid, and he was the hottest thing for the whole season, so you're going to pay a little bit more. If you had Buffalo, you'd pay a little bit more than somebody that may had the Islanders. So, it's not the same across the board in many of these now. So you're basically putting your money on the line to say, okay, I think it's worth $30 or $50, or in some cases of these high $200 for a spot for a chance at getting, something that's potentially worth it.
Hmm.
Do you come out on top all the time? No, not at all. The only person that actually makes money in most cases are the breakers themselves. And
Right.
granted, I'll give it to them. It's kind of a lucrative thing. And if you're good at it and you've been around long enough and been in the game long enough, there's guys making some money. I mean, or guys consistently make between 100 and $200 every every time they break a box. And they're doing upwards of 10, 20 boxes a week, or cases rather. So, you know, is it crazy to think that somebody can make a couple grand a week breaking open cards? No, it's not. If you know how to do it and you've done it right. Now, that's totally different from then what my opinion is as far as what this does to the hobby.
Okay.
Because my opinions are that, where I understand it, I think in the long run it dilutes the hobby. I mean, sure, it brings people in that don't want to go out. And I mean, you and I have talked about this many times, as well as we have with other people. What does it feel like to drop 100, $150 on a box and get squat out of that box?
Pretty
It doesn't,
terrible.
yeah, it doesn't feel very good. That's like gambling too. I bought a couple of the Mega Millions tickets. Did I win? No. Somebody from Indiana won, but not me. But that's besides the point. It's the same kind of thing. You plop down money, you hope for a return. You don't necessarily get. So what the case breakers do is they expose a lot of these higher end cards that may or may not hit the market at the rates that they do now that the breakers are out there. So you got people buying spots in these breaks hitting these mega hits that they're getting, the whatever jersey triple auto, you know, DNA cards or whatever they are for whatever set you're dealing with. They're exposing all these to the market. So then the secondary market comes along, and here's these you know collectors
Hmm.
that that drop down a couple $100 for spots in a break, and they're looking at these cards and like, well, I got to turn these around to try to make my money back. So now they're trying to inflate prices through the roof. And again, that's what you saw with McDavid this year. Look, this guy, he rookie of the year, which everybody predicted. He didn't finish the season as the top rookie like everybody thought he would. He
Hmm.
got injured. Now, if he wouldn't have got injured, what would have happened? Who knows? Could he have been the second coming? I don't know. I can't tell you that. Is he good? Yes, he's good. But he wasn't even the best rookie, and yet his cards were just astronomical numbers. I mean, even right now, you mentioned earlier, Upper Deck EPAC has that fusion set, right?
Hmm. Right.
Fusion cards are all over COMC right now. All over Check Out My Cards. You can buy pretty much the entire set if you picked and choose what you wanted. But his Fusion rookie black parallel, I think it is,
Hmm.
it's $500. It's selling for
And
$500.
this is a digital
And
card.
it's well, it started as a digital card because it's the parallel version. You actually get the real
Oh,
card,
okay.
but $500 that came out of an EPAC. So I don't I don't think that the market would be what it is now, cards, especially in many of the other sports, because we deal with hockey mostly, but I mean, you look at basketball. Oh my, I mean, there was a box. I was at, um, oh, where was it? I was at Baseball Card Exchange not too long ago
Right.
because it's very close to where I live. And walking around, and there was this box sitting on the top shelf, and I believe it was gold, um, gold label, gold bar, gold standard. I don't know what it was. Some Panini product, I believe, and it was a basketball set. It was in a huge box on the top shelf, and the price tag on it was $1,400 for
Wow.
one box, and it had four cards in it.
Wow.
And I just laughed. I laughed at it. I laughed. So here's somebody that buys a case. I think there's three boxes in a case, right? So it's $1,400 for a box. Okay, so you're looking at over 5 grand here.
4, 10, 20, 30, 40, 4,200 for
Yeah,
3 boxes. You said three
yeah,
boxes in a case?
yeah. I think it's three boxes in a case.
Okay, so
Sorry, math is hard, but I mean, you get my point. So you're plunking down 4,000 or more for a case of this product. How much are you going to sell? 30 spots for, or are there 32 teams in basketball? How many 32 teams? Obviously the point of a breaker is to make money, so they're going to want
well,
to
on
sell
that it's
these.
not going to work because if you're only getting 12 cards, you're not going to get all that. You might not get a Chicago Bulls card in those 12 cards.
And that's the risk that the buyer takes,
So now
because
you're
in
talking
in
about, yes, okay.
so in the ultra premium boxes where you have 32 spots, but there may only be 10, 12, 15 cards
Right.
total in the
Right.
entire break from the case. Think of the cup, for instance. Somebody opens up the cup. There's not, what is 5 cards?
5 cards.
5 cards. So, you open up a case of the cup, there's five, what is there? There's 5 boxes.
We'll just say 5 boxes. That
Yeah.
sounds
So
nice.
25 cards, you got 30 teams. So
Well,
potentially 5 teams could get skunked, maybe even more if there's not somebody else there. And these people are getting, or the collectors or whoever's getting in these breaks pays 60, $70, and you get nothing.
so
So you just paid $70 to watch somebody on video open packs of cards.
what's
Not
funny
my thing.
is that so there's a contributor to Puck Junk. His name's Jim Howard, not to be confused with the goalie Jim Howard. But this Jim Howard in particular, he lives It's in North Carolina. He's a Hurricanes fan. He did a case break. He actually wrote about it for Puck Junk a couple months ago. And what was funny was that he bought two spots, and it was of the new Contours product. So he bought two spots. He got the Coyotes. He got the Islanders, and the only Islanders card he got was a base card.
And that's the thing. He's lucky he got a base card
And
because many of these breaks they don't even give you the base cards.
the other one, well, I think they like give you the option, like if you want the base cards or you don't want the base cards. Like, so for the Coyotes,
Most of them.
he got a patch card, he got a patch auto of Max Domi,
Well, that's good.
and then he got a Shane Doan um, base card, and so that was fine. So he got like two patch cards. One of them was autographed by a rookie. That's fine. But then the Tavares. But then what was funny was he did a little digging and then he found the checklist and he found out that like there were literally no hits for the Islanders. Like he he didn't he didn't get to choose what teams he got, obviously, because then everybody would just pick Edmonton. But he he got stuck with the team that didn't have that literally had no hits. Like it only had three base cards in the entire set. So even the best case scenario, he would have ended up with three base cards. So he emailed the company that did the case break, and he's like, I know people are not happy with their cards. He's saying, but however, I literally had no shot of getting anyone in this slot. And they said, "Yep, we agree," and they refunded his $30.
Really?
Yeah, well, they gave him a credit, and then they said that they said that their next Count Tours case break, they were actually going to combine teams.
And I've seen that a lot where there's no hits, so the bottom few that only have maybe a couple and they'll throw them all in there. But, for the most part, it's the gamble that you take. And yeah, is sports card collecting gambling? It can be. If that's all you do is open boxes and open packs and do case breaks and everything else, yeah, it's exactly what it is. And those of us that go out and we buy boxes and we buy packs with there's something in there. I think we do it for a little different reason because we're more collectors than we
Right.
are trying to be profiteers on the business. And I understand it is a business, just as card companies are out to make money, brick and mortar stores are out to make money. Somebody at some point in time, whether they're a middleman or not, or the person at the top, they're trying to make money. So, those of us at the bottom, it goes back to how do you want to survive in the hobby? If you're going to participate in the hobby, how are you going to exist in the hobby? Are you a case breaker? Are you a pack opener? Are you a player collector? Are you a team collector? What is your focus? And getting into and doing a little bit of it once in a while. I mean, I'll admit I've gotten into group breaks before. I get into though, they're ones where you can pick the team. They cost the same amount across the board, and I do my homework and I find out what's actually in this product. Is it something I want? Is it something I need? Or is it something that maybe I have a chance at getting something cool? And so, I've done those before. I've done the random team ones. Only one time has it ever worked out in my favor. And as many as I've participated in, it really hasn't panned out. So, I'm not saying that because I'm jaded on the whole thing. I just think, from my standpoint, and seeing how this affects the hobby as a whole, I think it really waters down what's out there, forces the prices up, and really, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't put any pressure on any of the manufacturers to step up their game and put out a decent product.
How does it water down? You said what's out there,
Well, it waters down what's out there based off of supply and demand. I mean, you pull a card that's, one out of 50
right?
autograph something other. If there weren't people breaking cases at the rate that they are, and this product was actually released in normal quantities, that 1 out of 50 might hold a lot more value than it will when there's 1,000 case breakers on the day the product comes out. They all bust their product between, a day or two. And now all of a sudden, that 1 out of 50, 34 of them are already on eBay for sale.
Right, so that first one never gets to go for a hefty sum because you
Right.
have 10 of them or 20 of them making a debut at the same time.
Right. Now, on the other hand, exposing the lower count stuff, the 1 of 1s, the 1 out of 2, 1 out of 5s or whatever, those get exposed a lot more often. So, you see a sell sheet and you're like, wow, there's a 1 of 1, Connor McDavid pacifier from when he was a baby in the card. Oh, I have a chance at that. Well, it probably is going to get exposed to the market way sooner than it would if you didn't have the case breakers out there. So there's good and bad to it. There's a give and take to it. I mean, you gotta take that for what it is, and it's not going to go away. I think it's gotten diminished. It's starting to get diminished because you got to have a lot of traction and you got to have a lot of support to be able to maintain a group break, or not a group break, but to maintain a case breaking operation. And it's getting harder for people to get into it and establish themselves, just jumping in, making a quick buck and jumping out.
Right.
I mean, companies like Upper Deck, for instance, they've started the case breakers. They have that whole case breakers tier of purchasing. So guys that regularly purchase cases and stuff all the time, these guys get special pricing. It's not the pricing that is out to the vendors and the dealers either. It's a completely different pricing tier, because you're talking guys that are dropping thousands of dollars.
Right, but you'd give them a quantity discount anyway. Like if you bought 10 of a product, if you bought if you bought one case personally versus if you bought 20 cases, right? Then you get a better.
But even me going and buying 20 cases, like say Series 1 comes out next year, I came into a bunch of money and I'm like, screw it, I'm buying a 20 cases Series 1. But I'm not a regular buyer. They don't know me from anybody else. So it's the guys that keep coming back and they drop 1,000 here and 2,000 there and 4,000 there and 2 more thousand over and over and over again. And they can, because if you look at the prices for the buy-ins on a lot of these, they're making that money. So they make enough back to buy into the next break plus some. And like I said, some of these guys are clearing a couple $1,000s a week. So for them, great, wonderful. I'd love to be able to quit my day job and just mess with cards all the time. But again, these are not generally collectors themselves. These are guys that are in it for, and they're making money. I'm not trying to demonize them or anything. I get what they're doing. I got it. But I'm not a personal fan of the way that whole side of the hobby business has gone. I'm kind of happy that a lot of the companies that started out that way, a lot of the smaller ones have kind of fizzled out, and really there's, I could probably think off the top of my head about 20 that I hear all the time, and I hear their names all the time. But any that aren't in that top 20, I don't hear very often. So that could be a good thing. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know.
I think for me, as far as case break, like you said, we collect for different reasons. I never really liked the gambling aspect of trading cards. Like, when I was in, like, early 90s, when you're like, you opened a pack of cards and you're like, yes, this card is a $5 card or whatever. Even if I didn't get a good card in a pack, I was still happy with the cards that I got. I bought a pack of Upper Deck. You know what? If I didn't get a Yager, Roenick rookie, or Fedorov, I was still happy that I got cards, and I was still happy if I got cards that I needed for my set. And I think that that's the thing. Like, for those like me who are just like, oh, I'm just happy to get these cards that I need for my set, it's a loss because you're spending $3, $5 a pack. You can't really make back your money on it, but that's fine. You don't make your money back on chewed gum either. You get your enjoyment out of it, and then you spit it out. But I think I'd have a really hard time spending $30 or $50 drawing the Winnipeg Jets and then getting a Mark Shefferly, or however you say his name, 1 of 1 jersey patch auto card. And then I'd be like, great, I'm going to sell it.
I think I have one of those.
And I'm going to sell it, and I'm going to hope that I get more than $30 for it, right? And that's just what it becomes. Like, it just feeds this never-ending cycle of, like, sports trading cards are worth money, and so hey, I spent $50, but I could flip this card for $100, so now I'm $50 ahead, and it just I don't know, it just
But
I can't buy into that.
but again, and that's exactly what it does. It makes a watered down product because everything hits at once. A product's released on Tuesday, by Wednesday morning, every hit you can possibly imagine that's going to come out of that product is now on eBay. If you're a buyer, if you're a buyer, it's they're fine. But those buyers suddenly become sellers of all the high end stuff. Because they're all trying to recoup the costs of what they paid into the break, so they can afford to pay into another break. And I mean, look, if you broke your own case of cards, right, and you pull a card that was a $300 card,
Right.
and that the case cost you $1,500, you're going to work to try to get $300 out of that card or more,
Absolutely. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Well, that's on your side. So if you pull a card, that same card, out of a group break that you paid $50 to buy into, you may not necessarily be asking for 300 or whatever.
Right.
You may take less because it only costs you $50 to get it. So you're creating this. You're basically taking less than market value, and now you're artificially creating a new market for those cards. And so that waters it down. The quantity waters it down, and the number of sellers that are out there trying to unload all of this stuff waters it down. So there's no long term. I guess there's no long term market credibility to new product.
Hmm.
There's no more of this. Hey, the product was released last week. I'm going to wait until 3 months from now, and then I'll buy it and see what I can do with it. No, it's instant gratification. Something new hits the market. Somebody wants it. They're willing to pay for it. You pull that $300 card, you could probably sell it for 300. 2 weeks from now, you're not going to get that.
Well, you know what? In closing, because I think we should wrap things up, what advice would you give to someone who was like, hey, the cup is coming out, or a new upper deck hockey set is coming out. I can't necessarily afford a box. What advice would you give to somebody, just so they don't throw their money all willy nilly on a case break? What would your advice to them be?
Do your homework. Find out what is in the product and what your potential is for the product. Look at where you're planning on buying into the case from. Is it from a reputable dealer? Is it from guys that have been established for a long time? And what are the terms? I mean, do you get everything? If you have the Dallas Stars and they pull 17 Dallas Stars base cards and no hits, are you entitled to the base cards? If you're a collector and you're looking for that kind of stuff, that's probably going to be important to you. So you got to do your homework. You got to know what you're getting into. You got to know what's in the product in order to spend your hard-earned money.
Or what you also got to find out is if it's one of those Franken cards, you got to find out if you get it or
Oh,
not. Like if it's that Mark Savard card that I got that had a Calgary Flames swatch, but it pictured him as an Atlanta Thrasher, but it said Boston Bruins and had a Bruins logo on it. So you could argue that it's a Flames card because it had a Flames swatch. You could argue that it's a Thrashers card because he was wearing his Thrashers uniform. But you'd probably win the argument that it's a Bruins card because it had the Bruins logo and it said Boston Bruins on it. Or maybe they'll cut it into thirds and ship everybody a piece of it, right?
they most of the ones I've seen, and a lot of the reputable ones will have a page on their website, or somewhere available where they'll show you the terms of their breaks. And most of them have them, and they have all this fine print, and they usually deal with that. And the majority of the time, from what I've seen, it's they are giving it to whoever has the team the player is pictured in uniform wise. So even if it's like I've got like 37 of this Sergei Samsonov old upper deck jersey card,
Yep.
and they're all different, but the majority of them, well, not the majority, all of them, he's pictured in an Oilers uniform. The card says Montreal Canadiens, but the patch is clearly from a Bruins uniform. So, there's three teams right there that you can choose from. But if he's pictured in that route, they team cards where there's multiple players from different teams. They figure that out. So a lot of times those get random off or auctioned between the people that have those teams. But everything is different. That's why I say you got to do your homework. You got to find out really what you're buying into and find out if you're going to get skunked before.
You get skunked. Find out if you get skunked before you get skunked, right?
Exactly. And see, here's the thing. I've done group breaks before myself. I mean, I picked up a whole bunch of older hockey stuff. I put it out there and did group breaks. Everybody paid the same. I don't think any of my breaks were more than $15 with shipping. And it was fun to do. I did it a couple times. And it was great, but I wasn't out to like make any money. I basically put the price where I had enough to cover shipping, and that was it. Just did it because it was fun. But at the same time, 12 $15 for a break versus where you're opening 6 or 7 boxes versus a $1,400 case break that you're paying $50 to get in and you may not get something. It's a different story.
Well, that's good advice. All right. Thank you for listening to the Puck Junk Podcast, and we will be shouting at you again soon.